Every archaeological find is important in its own way, but some archaeological finds are better than others. They might tell us more about the past than others, or even encourage us to think about history in a whole new way. Sometimes they're better than the rest purely because they're so beautiful to look at. The discoveries you're about to see in this video come from far and wide and are separated by thousands of years, but they're all incredible. The remains of a Roman amphitheater were uncovered in Switzerland in January 2022. And we're not just talking about any old Roman amphitheater. If historians are correct in their assumptions, this was the last amphitheater the once mighty empire ever built. The discovery was made by experts from Aargau Cantonal Archaeology in Kaiseraucht, which was once a Roman town known as Augusta Raurica. The town was founded by Lucius Munatius Plancus in the year 44 BCE. By the start of the 2nd century, it had become a successful trading town and was home to around 20,000 people. The remains of the amphitheater were found when the Basel Rowing Club cleared ground for the construction of a new boathouse. Some of the walls are still standing, as are the remains of the enormous South Gate. Experts have been able to identify traces of fine plaster on the interior walls and the imprints of post holes where support beams for wooden grandstands once sat. Archaeological evidence suggests that the structure was built during the 4th century. That makes it the youngest Roman amphitheater ever found. Not every creature or animal that existed thousands of years ago is still around today. There are some species that we only know about because they're seen in ancient works of art. In January 2022, archaeologists restoring a temple in Iraq after it was damaged by Daesh discovered carvings of what they believe to be a previously unknown species of camel. They hypothesized that the camels are early hybrids of the Bactrian and dromedary species. The carvings are part of the Temple of Alat in the city of Hatra, not far from Mosul. This was once the capital of the Kingdom of Hatra. The carvings have been studied before, but previous studies have concluded that they show 2 Bactrian camels and 2 dromedaries. It's now thought that the faces and fur of the Bactrian camels aren't quite right for the species and may instead be something else. The frieze was added in the year 168 during renovations ordered by King Sennacherib and his son Absamiya. The temple was redecorated to the goddess Alat at the same time, so there may be a connection between Alat and this new species of camel. We're back in Italy now, but we're not talking about the Romans. We're going much further back in time than that. This is the necropolis of Pantalica. It's a collection of rock-cut chamber tombs forming an enormous cemetery in southeast Sicily. The first human burials in the cemetery happened around 3,300 years ago and continued until 2,700 years ago. Nobody knows for sure how many individual tombs there are at the site, but the number is thought to exceed 4,000. The necropolis has been listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2005. It was probably created by the Sicels, who arrived on the island during the Iron Age. Each of the tombs was once sealed with either a slab or stones, but all of them appear to have been opened hundreds of years ago for unknown reasons. Some archaeologists believe there to be a Mycenaean palace at the top of the hill the tombs are cut into, but that's a controversial theory that's disputed by as many experts as there are who believe it. There are no longer any human remains at the site. Why stop at one Italian necropolis when you could have 2? This is the Ipogeo dei Cristallini, also known as the Hypogeum of Cristallini Street. It's in Naples and it's around 2,300 years old and is remarkable for both its size and its beauty. The tombs inside this Hellenistic-style hypogeum are more like large rooms and houses and contain countless rare examples of Greek art. The necropolis has been extensively studied by historians and archaeologists since its discovery, and in the summer of 2022, it'll open to the public for the first time. The hillside side of the necropolis was probably chosen for its volcanic rock, which is soft and easy to carve into. Working with such a pliable material meant that the builders of the hypogeum could carve grand staircases and 4 different tomb areas, each with its own elaborate entrance and style. Tombs so ostentatious must have been reserved only for the elite of Greco-Roman society. The funerary paths that once led to the tombs were adapted hundreds of years later and became the roads of a new settlement called Sanita. After the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the necropolis became buried under tons of volcanic ash, and so it's been left almost like a time capsule for modern archaeologists to find. The ancient Greeks were an incredibly advanced people for their time, but they didn't have laptops. That much is obvious. That's what makes this 2,100-year-old funerary carving so strange. It looks for all the world like a child showing their mother something on their laptop. Perhaps a cat meme. But it can't be. That begs the question of what the carving is supposed to represent. It's been suggested that it could be a jewelry box or perhaps a hinged mirror. Some conspiracy theorists who insist that the object must be a laptop point to the fact that it appears to have USB ports on its side. But the so-called ports are actually drill holes for the attachment of an object. The carving is called Grave Niskos of the Enthronous Woman with an Attendant, which isn't the snappiest title we've ever heard. It's fashioned out of marble, and aside from the strange laptop-like object, it's a fairly typical item for its period. Reliefs like this one first appeared around 2,600 years ago and stayed in fashion for about 500 years. They were usually positioned above the graves of the deceased. Uncovering a Roman mosaic is a slow and delicate process. In the case of the Boxford mosaic of Berkshire, England, it's a process that took 3 years between 2016 and 2019. Now the work is done, and we can gaze upon it and say that it's one of the most impressive mosaics ever found in the country. It's part of what was once a large Roman villa built during the 4th century. The scenes in the artwork are taken from ancient Greek mythology, with special attention paid to the triumphs of Bellerophon and Pelops. There are also several images of horses, which might reflect the interests of the villa's owner. Experts in Roman history are especially interested in a scene showing a race between Pelops and the king, as it's one of only 3 mosaic representations of the story ever found in former Roman territories. As is often the case with large-scale mosaics, the images come with an inscription. It reads, "I want to live," which is an unusual motto and hasn't been seen before on Roman mosaics in Britain. The phrase could be interpreted in a variety of ways, so experts aren't sure of its intended meaning. Many of us keep a diary, but it would never occur to most of us to write diary entries on our floorboards. Nevertheless, someone did precisely that in a beautiful French Alpine chateau during the late 19th century. The diary was written by a carpenter called Joachim Martin and began in the year 1880. It was found during renovation work at the Chateau of Picumtal in 2018. Joachim wrote his diary entries, many of which concern the activities of villagers in the town of Le Crotte, on the underside of the floorboards before laying them. The most shocking of his diary entries says that a man named Benjamin, who he once considered a friend, is guilty of murdering 4 children he had with his mistress in order to hide his affair from his wife. Benjamin later tried to seduce Joachim's own wife. He felt unable to tell the police about the crime because Benjamin's mother was his father's mistress. The local priest is also targeted by Joachim, as the carpenter feels that he uses the confession booth to extract inappropriate sexual confessions from the town's women. It's an incredible insight into the region's past and has since been turned into a book. We know how we keep coming back to the theme of Italian burial sites, but it's hard not to when there are such fascinating places. This is the necropolis of the Banditaccia in Cerveteri, Italy. It's the largest necropolis not only in Italy, but in the entire Mediterranean, and is more like a city of the dead than a graveyard. The necropolis remained in use for 600 years after accepting its first residents 3,000 years ago, and the various types of burial on display at the site can be used to track changes in Etruscan society over the centuries. The earliest of the tombs are little more than pits containing the ashes of the cremated dead. After about 200 years, the pits became burial mounds, and then by the end they were carved out of rock. Towards the end of the site's use, it had become so large that the Etruscans had to build roads to help people find their way around. The most important people in their society were buried in large square tombs lining the main roads. We're not sure why they stopped burying their dead here, but it may have something to do with the assimilation of their culture into Roman society. India isn't a country that's short on temples. You'll find hundreds of beautiful temples all over the country, but none quite like the Frog Temple of Old Dakwa, Uttar Pradesh. It's so named because of the enormous frog statue that sits in front of the temple's main staircase. On the back of the frog is a mystical diagram called yantra, which is generally associated with tantric practices. According to local residents, touching the back of the frog can bring you luck. Local historians in Uttar Pradesh say that the temple was built 200 years ago by Raja Bakat Singh, the Rajput ruler of old. He intended the frog to be a symbol of both prosperity and fertility. Not every historian agrees with that assessment, though, and there are parts of the temple that appear to be far older than 200 years. The most impressive aspect of the structure is its 7-tiered tower, which stands over 100 feet tall. Inside its sanctum sanctorum, you'll find a standing Nandi bull statue, which is the only example of its kind in the entire country. We're heading back to Italy yet again, but this time we're not going to a burial site. Or at least I don't think we are. This is Sud Naraxi di Baramini. It's a place of strange prehistoric ruins. Archaeologists have always struggled to date the site and have never been able to reach an agreement about what it was originally used for. A nuraghi is a complex of mounds and stone towers and is unique to Sardinia. Sud Naraxi di Baramini is the most impressive example of such a complex that still exists. It's likely that the structures here were built 3,700 years ago during the Bronze Age. The oldest part of the site is the central tower, which contains 3 chambers stacked one on top of the other and was once surrounded by walls. The style of the construction suggests that it might have been a fortress, but there's some evidence that it may also have served religious purposes. It's possible that it was created as a fortress, but its use changed over time. Very little is understood about ancient Sardinian history. This site allows us a rare chance to study it, but doesn't lead us to any conclusions. Back in the world of recent discoveries, this stunning golden neck ring was found in Esbjerg on Denmark's Jutland Peninsula in January 2022. The first experts to inspect the beautiful ancient artifact were so impressed by it that they say it has an almost divine quality. It's thought to date back to the country's Germanic age, which would make it between 1400 and 1700 years old. The amount of detail on the ring is incredible. It's 8 inches wide at its broadest point and has a surface covered in tiny crescent-like depressions. This style of jewelry has been seen in Denmark before, but only in fewer than a dozen examples. It seems that the artifact was buried on purpose, but archaeologists don't think it was a votive offering. Instead, they think it's likely that its owner was trying to keep it safe from bandits or barbarians. All the evidence suggests that it was never touched again after its burial until the archaeologists found it. Despite all its years in the ground, the neck ring is still in pristine condition and will now become a museum piece. Discoveries don't come much bigger than this next one. It's an entire ancient Roman port, and it was found off the coast of Syria in January 2021. As you may have guessed from the fact that we said the port is off the coast, the whole port is now underwater. Its location isn't far from Tartus. Marine archaeologists say that the port was also a sea fortress and was built during the 1st century. Investigations at the site are ongoing and are likely to remain so for several years, but thus far the team has found the remains of a lighthouse, 4 enormous marble columns, and hydraulic structures. They hope to be able to obtain a more specific date for the port city from the fragments of ceramics they've been able to recover from the seabed. Depending on where the ceramics come from, They might even be able to shed new light on the maritime trade routes that once connected the Syrian coast with other major Mediterranean regions in ancient times. It's possible that the Roman port was built atop an older settlement founded by the Phoenicians. But more study will be required before that can be confirmed. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.